Hello, hello. Thank you so much for tuning into this ASMR true crime soft spoken video. Today I'm going to be doing a case that is so interesting. A little while ago, I randomly had this thought of, I wonder if anyone has ever disappeared twice. So I was Googling it and I didn't really get any results. Kind of let it go, figured it was a long shot. And then the other night I just randomly look up interesting cases, I guess. I don't even know what I typed in Google, but this case came up. And this woman disappeared not just once, not twice, but 3 times. So, I am going to be doing the disappearance of Hannah Up. Hannah Emily Up was born November 29th, 1984. She was born to mother Barbara Bellis and father David Up. She grew up with her brother Dan and her parents in a small town in Oregon. Her parents were ministers. They attended a Japanese American church. Her parents were both American, but her mother was fluent in Japanese and very involved in the church and community. As a child, Hannah was, quote, the princess of her church. Hannah's parents were religious and had very strict values, especially her father. When Hannah was 15, her parents were divorced as her religious views started to differ greatly. Her father moved abroad and taught the gospel often to indigenous tribes, where he lived in one-room homes in remote villages. Her brother became a Navy officer and stationed in Japan. She was described by her friends as, quote, she lights up the room. Everyone you talk to is going to say she is their closest friend. She has no barriers. She was raised to trust and care for everyone, and she did. According to the Myers-Briggs personality test, which Hannah often referenced, she was an ENFP, extroverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving, a personality type that describes idealists looking for deeper meaning and connection. She attended college at Bryn Mawr, a liberal arts college just outside of Philadelphia. In her sophomore year of college, she attended a United Methodist church. She was taken aback after going to a talk by Beth Strode, a United Methodist minister who was defrocked. I've never used that word in my life. After telling her congregation that she was in a romantic relationship with a woman. In her junior year, Hannah came out to her mother and those around her that she had began dating a woman. Her father was very strong in his belief against homosexuality, and although she found herself drawn to Quakerism and against some of the beliefs of her father, she still traveled with her father at least once a year, and whatever the part of the world he was teaching, Hannah always spoke fondly of her father, despite having to hide a part of herself while being with him. So in summer of 2008, Hannah was preparing for a job as a middle school teacher at Thurgood Marshall Academy, a public school in Harlem, New York. On August 27th, Hannah put on some shorts and a sports bra and headed out for a run. She did not return to home later that night. Her roommate, Manuel Ramirez, had found her wallet, passport, Metro card, and cell phone in her purse on the floor of her bedroom. She was reported missing, and the search began. Hannah's friends were camping out at her apartment. They made maps of the city park, splitting them into quadrants, and sent groups to look for her in the woods and on running paths and under benches. Almost 2 weeks later, a detective asks Hannah's mother to come in to view surveillance footage from an Apple store. On the footage was a woman wearing a sports bra and running shorts, her brown hair pulled into a high ponytail. On this footage, you can see her walking downstairs when a man approaches her and asks if she was the missing teacher from the media, to which you can see her assuring him that she wasn't and that she was fine. Her mother was immediately able to identify the woman as her daughter, Hannah. Another camera had captured Hannah using one of the store's laptops to log into her Gmail account. She looked at the screen for a second before walking away. 2 days after Hannah had been seen at the Apple store, she was spotted at a Starbucks in Soho. By the time the police arrived, she had walked out the back door. The police recorded sightings of her at 5 New York sports clubs, all of them near Midtown, where the detective on the case presumed that she had gone to shower. On September 16th, 20 days since she'd been missing, the captain of a Staten Island ferry saw a woman's body bobbing in the water near Robbins Reef, a rocky outcropping with a lighthouse south of the Statue of Liberty. 2 deckhands steered a rescue boat towards the body, which was floating face down. A deckhand lifted her ankles, and the other picked her up by her shoulders. She took a gasp of air and began crying. The woman was taken to Richmond University Medical Center on Staten Island. For 3 weeks, her memory had been inaccessible to her. But then when the medical staff asked her questions, she was suddenly able to tell them that her name was Hannah and give them her mother's phone number. Barbara arrived within an hour. Barbara said that Hannah looked, quote, both sunburned and paled. She'd been pulled behind a boat for 3 weeks. The first thing she said when she saw her mother was, "Why am I wet?" She was treated for hypothermia, dehydration, and a severe sunburn on the left side of her body, and her condition rapidly improved. She was then transferred to a psychiatric unit run by Columbia University Medical Center. She underwent a series of brain imaging tests, but the doctors couldn't find any neurological condition that would cause her to forget her identity. They concluded that the episode was psychological in nature. She was given a diagnosis of dissociative amnesia with dissociative fugue. So, dissociative amnesia is one of 3 dissociative disorders listed under the DSM. It includes temporary loss of recall memory caused by dissociation, which may last a period of seconds or years. The interruption in memory is most often a result of psychological trauma, and you rule out any source of drugs or any other neurological conditions. So dissociative fugue gets added on to that diagnosis when there is a temporary form that causes someone to completely forget their identity, and they travel a distance during this amnesia period. Dissociative episodes are typically triggered by trauma, a natural disaster, or by a profound internal conflict. People can often wander off for months at a time, sometimes assuming new identities. So Hannah was hypnotized to see if she could recall any traumatic events that triggered her fugue, but she couldn't remember anything unusual. Hannah and her mother, father, and brother said that as a young child, she hadn't endured anything that they considered trauma. The beginning of the school year was always stressful. Her students struggled with problems such as hunger and unstable housing that she couldn't address within the confines of her classroom. Hannah thought that her fugue may have began with a liminal phase. There were 2 days where she slept in her apartment but communicated with no one. Her bank records show that she had gone to a movie in Times Square, which she had no memory of seeing. So her brother Dan meets with the captain of Staten Island Ferry to analyze the currents in the Hudson River. They concluded that Hannah must have entered the river in lower Manhattan before the tide took her south. Hannah and Dan walked along the piers downtown, and when they got to Pier 40, a former marine terminal on the west end of Hudson Street, Hannah told him the place felt familiar, and she remembered lights floating on the water. Hannah and her family concluded that she either swam to or was washed up onto Robin's Reef. She may have gotten the scrapes on her knees from the rocks. She may have slept there the following day, long enough to get sunburned. Then she returned to the water. In an interview with New York Times, Hannah said, quote, "I went from going for a run to being in the ambulance. It was like 10 minutes had passed, but it was almost 3 weeks." Hannah had seen a few therapists, but found conversations with her friends more helpful. She described the mental health system as dogmatic and overly attached to its diagnostic models. She felt as if her experience had to be reshaped to fit the diagnosis. A little more than a year after her disappearance, Hannah left New York, joining her mother at Pendle Hill, sometimes called Mecca for Quakers. The institution was found in 1930 as a retreat for people of all religions. Hannah worked in the kitchen and attended daily meetings for worship. After working at Pendle Hill for 3 years, Hannah was hired as a teacher assistant at a Montessori school for underserved children, and she moved to Kensington, Maryland in 2012. On the morning of Hannah's first day of school, Barbara got a phone call from the police. They told her that Hannah's purse, wallet, and cell phone had been found on a wooded path in Kensington. A colleague reported that she was driving to school and had seen Hannah walking quickly in the wrong direction. Hannah's mother and friends from Pendle Hill drove to Maryland and looked for her in the woods and put up flyers around town. They discovered that she hadn't slept at her apartment the night before, and in the previous 24 hours, no one had talked to her. The next day, at 10:30 p.m., Barbara received a call from an unknown number, and all she heard on the phone was, "Mom." Hannah had found herself in a dirty creek in a residential area in Wheaton, Maryland, which is a mile and a half from her school. There was a shopping cart beside her. Hannah walked to the closest commercial area and borrowed a stranger's phone. She had realized that she had been walking for more than 2 days. In both instances, she had disappeared at the beginning of the school year after traveling with her father during the summer. In both fugues, she had been drawn to water. Hannah returned to her job within a few days. The following year, in 2013, she was hired as a teaching assistant for preschoolers at a Montessori school in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. When she disclosed her condition, the administrators at the school were warm and welcoming. Hannah moved to the east end of St. Thomas, away from the docks for cruise ships, which brought in tens of thousands of tourists to the island each week. She could see the British Virgin Islands from the balcony of her apartment, which she called her island palace. After a year of teaching, the school paid for her to take summer classes at a training center in Portland, Oregon, so she could eventually become certified and lead her own classes. She saw a therapist on the island, but she put more stock in tending to her physical health. She swam in the ocean nearly every day, becoming so strong she could reach cays more than 2 miles away. In 2017, Hannah was 32 years old. She had completed her Montessori degree and her 4th year of teaching on the island. On September 6, 2017, Hurricane Irma hit St. Thomas. She and her roommates huddled in the laundry room of their apartment. The wind reached 185 miles an hour, shattering one of their windows. She informed her friends and family that she was safe from the storm. 6 days after the storm, Hannah drove to the house of her ex-boyfriend Joe Spallino, a scuba instructor, and saw that his belongings were gone. She learned from his landlord that he had rushed to the marina to get on one of the Mercy ships, giving people free rides off the island. Hurricane Maria, another Category 5 storm, was forecast to hit the island the following week. On September 15th, Hannah drove to the marina to say goodbye to her ex. He was waiting to board a cruise ship to Puerto Rico, and they talked for several hours. Hannah left the marina, and she never used her phone again. The next day, she helped Norman Bollinger prepare the school for Hurricane Maria by taking pictures off the wall. That night, Hannah's 3 roommates told her that they were all trying to leave the island. One of them, Leslie Bonnell, said that Hannah told her, quote, "I'm staying, that's where my heart is. School is going to be the first step towards normalcy for these kids." The next morning on September 14th, 2017, Hannah left a note that said she was intending to go for a morning swim at the nearby Sapphire Beach and then head to the school where she worked to complete a few tasks. She never returned home that night. The following day, there was a faculty meeting and she didn't attend. Her friend Maggie Guzman called Hannah's closest friends on the island and in the States, but no one had spoken to her for 3 days. It was the same time of year as her previous 2 fugues, and they told Maggie to search the nearby water. Maggie and other friends started with Hannah's favorite beach, Sapphire, where she often snorkeled. Near the water there was a small bar that served hamburgers and mimosa. Is that it? It's a weird combo, but I'm right there with it. That morning, a construction cleanup crew found Hannah's sundress, a pair of sandals, and her car keys laid out in the sand. Hannah's car was in the parking lot. Inside was her purse, wallet, passport, and cell phone. Workers at the small bar close to where Hannah's car was found said that they had seen her that day and she was not acting like herself. It seemed pretty clear that she went into a disoriented state and then decided to go for a swim. The oceans were doing abnormal things with the current after Irma. Even if you were to be a professional swimmer, they state it would be really hard to fight against the current. And there were 3 and 4 foot waves. So this really was not a condition for swimming. Giving Hannah's strength as a swimmer, her friends assumed that she could survive for several days in the water. By boat, they searched the shoreline and a small island nearby where the current might have taken her. The Coast Guard sent 3 helicopters. Her friends also checked the manifests of people evacuated on Mercy ships, but her name wasn't listed. After 3 days, they had to call off the search to prepare for Hurricane Maria, which brought heavy rain to the island. When the storm subsided, an EMT named Jacob Bradley, who had set up a makeshift emergency medical stations on the island, organized another search. If Hannah had drowned, her body would likely float to the surface within a few days. Bradley circled the island and all its cays in a rescue boat and also canvassed the airport, the homeless shelters, the beaches, and the hospitals, and interviewed captains who came in and out of the island's marinas. He went to the morgue and looked at 10 unclaimed bodies. None of them were Hannah. After Bradley's search failed to turn up anything, Barbara's Clearness Community, a group of Quakers appointed to guide someone facing a dilemma, bought her a one-way ticket to St. Thomas. She asked the Red Cross if she could do volunteer work in exchange for a bed. The Red Cross put her in touch with the owner of the Windward Passage Hotel in downtown St. Thomas, which was providing rooms to recovery workers and hotel employees who had lost their homes in the storms. Barbara arrived on the island on November 21st, more than 2 months after Hannah disappeared. She continued to search areas that Hannah frequented, going to places locals referred her to, checking in homeless shelters and psychiatric beds. Every few weeks, there was a sighting. It was often the same woman, a white teacher at a different private school on the island, or an older homeless woman from Massachusetts who panhandled in an open-air mall near the marina. On January 23rd, 2 caseworkers at Bethlehem House Shelter for the Homeless in downtown St. Thomas reported they had just seen Hannah at an abandoned building where people often smoked crack. Barbara and a detective from the Virgin Island Police Department drove to the building to check on the woman reported. The woman was thin and had acne, and her light brown hair was in a bun. Her eyes were a striking sea green. Barbara realized this was not Hannah. Her mother would continue to stay on the island for over a year searching for her daughter and also connecting to many on the island. She was involved in various church organizations and meetings with others. She often described phases of her life using the word journey, and the search for her daughter had taken on a new dimension. She was connecting with many lost women on the island who were not Hannah. She said, quote, "I need to be here, and I trust I'll know when I need to go back home." She felt that she was still piecing together clues and connections. No further evidence or leads came in to indicate what happened to Hannah. So let's go into the theories. The first theory, and commonly believed one, is that Hannah may have experienced another episode of dissociative fugue, got into the water, and died of natural circumstances, and they were unable to find her body. There was clear evidence that she had gone into the water based on the note she left behind for her roommate and her items being located by the water. And the pattern of her disassociation was always around water. The first time was right before the school year was starting in New York. The second time living in Maryland, it occurred just before the start of the school year. And this third time was once again right around the start of the school year. So possibly Hannah was feeling an excess amount of stress with the beginning of the school year and the natural disaster that triggered her. When Hannah's brother and the captain analyzed what she had done in the water in New York, it looked like Hannah was in the water for a full day, was able to pull herself up on a small piece of land by a lighthouse to sleep a little bit. So she was able to survive, but surviving the ocean during a hurricane is a whole other story. Some local ship captains believed that if Hannah had been swept out to sea and succumbed to the elements, her body would have washed up in a few days based on the currents. Jake Bradley, an Army veteran, an emergency technician, conducted searches for Hannah in the days and weeks after her disappearance. He says, another possibility is that she may have faked her own death, but this was not a likely option, he says. The state or condition is also considered to be temporary, usually weeks or months, and Hannah's been missing for 6 years. Some argue that perhaps she was impacted by her father's beliefs and felt compelled to maintain a relationship with him, so instead she decided to start a new life. Her father argues that this relationship was not a stressor, and they traveled frequently together. And she does seem like a person who would get up and start somewhere new easily. So this could be taken 2 ways. Why fake your death when it's easy to just move? Or could she be a person who would find it even easier to get up and start a new life? Either the way, the fact that she never contacted her mother or friends just feels off for this to be a possibility. Some hold on to the hope that Hannah is still alive. Perhaps she was able to get out of the water, find help, and perhaps she's still not connected with her identity. Some speculate that she may have gone swimming, was able to survive several days in the water, and she may have boarded one of the boats evacuating the island during the hurricane and traveled to Florida, the Bahamas, or Puerto Rico. She spoke fluent Spanish, which made it easy to land in a variety of areas, possibly. The most famous American fugue patient was a man named Ansel Bourne, a preacher who in 1887 left his home in Rhode Island with a vague sense that he had fallen from, quote, the path of duty. He traveled to Norristown, Pennsylvania, 240 miles away, opened up a shop selling stationery and candy, and he went by the name Albert Brown. His neighbors found his behavior perfectly normal. 2 months after leaving home, he knocked on a landlord's door and asked, "Where am I?" So the possibility that Hannah is somewhere, going by another identity, is something that her mother and loved ones hold on to. If you have any information in this case, you can contact the Virgin Island Police Department at 340-772-5605. You can also contact a local police authority if you've seen her elsewhere. On the Facebook page, Find Hannah Up, you can find key updates or report any potential information about this case. And that is the disappearance of Hannah Up. That is such an interesting case I've never heard of. The fact that she's been missing 6 years is so heartbreaking. Let me know what you guys think. I want to thank y'all for the questions. They are so awesome. I don't know how many I should do, but I feel like I can probably do a video soon, so that's so cool. Thank you. But I hope that you are having a good day or a good night wherever you are, and that you have a good day tomorrow. And I will see you in my next video.